In the early 1970s, the US began construction on what was meant to be the world's most advanced nuclear reprocessing plant. The Barnwell Nuclear Fuel Center, tucked into the woods of South Carolina, was designed to take the radioactive waste from commercial reactors and recycle it into usable fuel. It was cutting edge, it was massive, and it never opened. So why would the US pour $500 million into a facility that never processed a single ounce of fuel? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the rise and fall of the Barnwell Nuclear Fuel Center. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Let's go back to a time when America was deep in the Cold War, and nuclear energy was more than just a power source. It was a symbol of progress, security, and global dominance. The 1960s had seen a boom in civilian nuclear power, with new reactors going online nationwide. But with that growth came a problem that no one had fully solved: what to do with the radioactive waste. The spent fuel piling up at power plants couldn't just sit there forever. That's where the concept of reprocessing came in. Authorities considered if old fuel could be chemically treated and reused, the US could stretch its uranium supply, cut down on waste, and secure its energy future. It was a bold idea, and it needed a place to happen: remote, quiet, and already familiar with the industry. The woods outside Barnwell, South Carolina answered that call, and it would be here that a massive reprocessing plant was planned, one that could handle the waste of an entire nation. In 1971, construction officially began on the Barnwell Nuclear Fuel Plant. It was a private venture, which was unusual for a facility of that scale. Developed by Allied General Nuclear Services, the partnership between Allied Chemical and General Atomic, the plan was ambitious: a sprawling reprocessing center that could handle up to 1,500 metric tons of spent fuel each year, a figure which would have made it one of the most extensive facilities of its kind worldwide. The location, just outside the small town of Barnwell, offered both strategic seclusion and proximity to existing infrastructure, including the nearby Savannah River site. Now, the Savannah River site itself wasn't just another energy facility. It was a Cold War relic, built in the 1950s to produce weapons-grade plutonium and tritium. Managed by the Atomic Energy Commission, it had transformed the local economy and set a precedent for secrecy and scale. The presence of such an installation just miles away lent Barnwell a certain credibility. This region had already proven it could coexist with high-stakes nuclear infrastructure, even if most were hidden behind fences and federal silence. Anyhow, the companies behind the project poured hundreds of millions of dollars in, building out a labyrinth of reinforced concrete structures, containment systems, and specialized chemical processing units. The centerpiece was the fuel receiving and storage station, designed to house spent reactor fuel under heavy shielding and water pools for cooling. At the time, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, precursor to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, had supported commercial reprocessing as a cornerstone of their policy. Hence, Barnwell was intended to be the first in a network of private facilities nationwide. Everything about the plant, from its security protocols to its waste management system, was state-of-the-art by the era standards. And by 1976, after 5 years of construction, the facility was essentially complete. In fact, all that was left was approval to begin operations. But the timing, well, it couldn't have been worse. In the mid-1970s, just as Barnwell prepared to come online, the political winds began to shift. Concerns were growing, not just about nuclear safety, but about the proliferation risks tied to reprocessing. Since extracting plutonium from spent fuel, even for civilian use, raised alarms in Washington. The logic was simple. If plutonium could be recovered, it could also be diverted. And with nuclear tensions running high globally, the US wanted to set a strong example. So in 1977, President Jimmy Carter made a decisive move. You see, globally, the idea of reprocessing wasn't just theoretical, it was already underway. A facility of the kind had begun commercial operations in France, while the UK ran similar efforts Japan and the Soviet Union were also investing heavily as well. But in the US, the risks began to outweigh the rewards. Intelligence reports warned that the civilian technologies used for civilian recycling could be adapted for weapons programs elsewhere. In a world still reeling from nuclear proliferation fears, the optics of running a full-scale plutonium program were troubling. Hence, he banned commercial nuclear fuel reprocessing in the US as a part of a broader non-proliferation policy. The message was clear: energy security would take a back seat to global safety. Meaning, for Barnwell, the timing was catastrophic. The plant was finished and the equipment was in place, but it no longer had a legal pathway to operation. Allied General lobbied hard for an exemption, hoping to salvage the investment, but the tide had turned. Regulatory delays dragged on, support evaporated, and by 1983, the plant was formally shuttered. Much of the specialized equipment was removed, the technicians packed up and left, and with time, nature crept in slowly. Meaning, what was once envisioned as the crown jewel of nuclear recycling was left to rust in the South Carolina heat. After its closure in the early 1980s, the Barnwell plant sat in limbo. It was too expensive to demolish and too specialized to repurpose easily. The buildings, hardened for radioactive material, remained intact, windowless, bunker-like, and sealed behind fences and warning signs. For decades, the site was mostly untouched, but its reputation never faded. Barnwell became a cautionary tale to those in the industry. At best, it was a monument to overreach and shifting policy. Billions spent, zero output, and yet its story didn't quite end there. In the following years, the surrounding region continued to host nuclear activity. A separate nearby facility, the Barnwell Low-Level Waste Disposal Site, remained operational, drawing occasional headlines for accepting radioactive waste from all across the country. Meanwhile, the original reprocessing plant stood largely untouched. Then, in a strange twist, the site found a second life, not in energy, but law enforcement. Today, the complex is operated by the Government Training Institute. Police units from across the U.S. come here to run drills in an industrial and surreal setting. The plant's heavy infrastructure, once built to handle radiation, now hosts active shooter simulations and urban warfare exercises. The facility's maze-like layout is ideal for simulated breaches and hostage scenarios. Rooms once intended for technicians now stage tactical standoffs, whereas flashbangs echo through hallways designed initially to contain radiation. A repurposing that feels equal parts ingenious and perhaps a touch unsettling. An environment engineered for one high-risk scenario has now been adapted to another, which is perhaps not precisely what Allied General had in mind. And with its eerie atmosphere and Cold War backstory, Barnwell has also drawn a different kind of attention. Urban explorers, thrill seekers, and conspiracy theorists have all tried to enter the complex's abandoned heart. Some have been caught, whereas others have been injured. In one case, a trespasser fell through a rusted service stairwell and had to be airlifted out. Needless to say, this incident led to renewed security around the perimeter. Online forums and YouTube videos have speculated widely about what's still inside. Some claim there are sealed-off corridors that have not been opened since the times of construction. Others suggest government experiments or buried waste left behind. None of this is verified, of course, but Barnwell's aura feeds that imagination. It has the perfect recipe: restricted access, Cold War origins, and a giant concrete shell that looks built for a secret. And though it never reprocessed a single gram of fuel, the Barnwell fuel plant left its mark. It remains one of the most expensive unused facilities in American history, a monument to a future that never arrived. We'll leave it there for today, but a special thanks to our Patreon supporter who suggested this video idea. If you guys have some episode topics that you'd like us to make, please get in touch over on our Patreon page by scanning this QR code or clicking the link in the description. Otherwise, until next time, I'm Ryan Sokash, signing off. And a quick confession for those of you still watching. I didn't want to make this episode because it's hard for me to say nuclear. All my life I said nuclear, but people go so ballistic in the comment section that I'm scared to talk about this stuff. Seriously. You live and you learn, right?